All right. So welcome to the fifth of our webinars that we're doing this week. Every day this week, we've done a webinar at 1 p.m. and the topics have varied. We've talked about wills and trusts and the similarities and differences. We did that on Monday. On Tuesday, we actually talked about this. So if you listen on Tuesday and you say, these slides look familiar, it's because they're the same exact slides. You should still listen because you may learn something new. I learn something new every time I talk about it. So I'm sure you'll learn something new listening to it. On Wednesday, we talked a little more in general about estate planning and Medicaid planning. And when it came to Medicaid plan, we got some pretty nitty-gritty crisis planning. That's getting qualified when we didn't plan ahead of time, which is obviously not the way we want things to go, but it's important for you to know there's always options out there, despite what your neighbors may say, or your friends, or even your attorney that doesn't do elder law may say. Yesterday, Jane Marie talked about estate planning and Medicaid myths, very specific falsehoods that people think are true. We hear these all the time. People come in and they ask us about the 7-year look-back period, and that's news to us. There's a 5-year look-back period, and of course, they're talking about Medicaid and nursing homes when they ask that question. There are a lot of things like that. I had a conversation with a family member actually yesterday, and his parents had COVID. My parents actually had COVID as well. His parents had COVID, and he was saying that they need some documents, and they wanted, among other things, to do a will so they could avoid probate. And I said, it's exactly wrong, because probate is literally approving of the will. So having a will doesn't avoid it. It actually means you're going to go through probate, perhaps. And obviously today we're revisiting community Medicaid, right? The idea of aging in place, and it's really aging where you want to as you get older. And the reason why we decided to do this particular seminar, 2 of the 5 days, was because there have been some gigantic, humongous, whatever word you want to use, whatever adjective applies, changes to this particular plan, the community Medicaid plan, which is going to make it a lot harder to qualify just 5 months from now. So there's going to be a lot of, there's a lot going on in the world. I understand that. There's going to be a lot of urgency that people just don't realize they should have when it comes to long-term care planning, in particular community Medicaid. And there'll be a lot of people who are going to need to act in the next 4 or 5 months to save a boatload of money, because if they end up acting 6 or 7 months from now, there'll be a very drastic change in their finances and how easy or difficult it is to qualify for the program. So, aging in place community Medicaid update. This is my version of it. Jane Marie is very good at what she does. She had an excellent rendition on Tuesday, and she was also helped with our geriatric care manager, Kim Hance. I'm going to describe what she does in awful detail. She's a lot better at it than I am. But Kim won't be able to join us today, but I want you to know that as we go through this and you start to have questions and you think, well, wait a minute, this is a little overwhelming, and what do all these hours mean, and so on, Kim will always be there, except for today, to hold your hand through the process. All right, so let's get going. So I should talk about the office, right? So I'm here. It's casual Friday every day these days, which is nice. We do have 4 office locations: Kingston, Clifton Park, Saratoga, and Albany. And because of what's going on, essentially we have 1 location, right? We're physically in Albany right now. I am in Albany. I could show you my windows if you want proof. I could hold up a newspaper if you want to know what day it is. We have like a skeleton crew working here, 3 or 4 people along with myself, or a rotating list of attorneys. And we're doing that so we could do the really, really important work of getting emergency documents out to our clients when they need to be done. The rest of our staff is working remotely, and we thankfully have the capabilities and technology to be able to do that. So we are a full service, fully operational firm right now, and we're doing phone and video consultations. We're doing phone executions of documents. We're going through documents with people today, and I'm meeting them tomorrow in the parking lot to have them sign, and we're using our masks. We have gloves. everything is done with your safety in mind, and actually our safety in mind as well. So it's a different world, but thankfully we're still able to help our clients. And believe it or not, when things like this happen in the world, it ends up being a very busy time for us because, first of all, people need their documents and they want them. Unfortunately, we've had clients who've gotten the virus. We've had clients who've had family members lost to the virus. So, people are on edge. They want to make sure that if the worst happened, that they're prepared and their documents reflect their wishes. And then also, the rest of the world doesn't stop in terms of people falling and people getting older and people needing help. It's just harder to get the help a little bit right now. So we're still here for you, and that's the message of this slide. As I mentioned, there's big changes to the Medicaid law when it comes to community Medicaid, and the reason for it is because we need money in the state, right? There's a shortage of money, right? Always a budget shortfall in New York, and the governor went and essentially assembled a Medicaid redesign team to come up with ideas on how they could make Medicaid and long-term care a little more efficient for the state, i.e. what they can cut. And I don't mean that in a real negative way. I mean, money is money, right? We all have to figure this out. But it's really, what programs is it worth cutting, right? We don't want them to take a knife and just slice through. We want them to really specifically look at what programs may actually be more efficient. That doesn't necessarily mean cutting the budget. But what they ended up coming up with was instituting a 30-month look-back period for a Medicaid application that is seeking home care. So a community Medicaid application is going to have 2.5 years worth of paperwork that's going to need to be provided to the county before they'll decide whether you qualify or not. That's a lot different than what it is today, which is there is a 0-month look-back period. And it's the 24th of April. It's another 6 days of the month. I could actually get anyone on this call qualified for community Medicaid if they needed it. I can get you qualified financially because I have 6 days to move heaven and earth and move your finances around in a way where on May 1st, you would financially be eligible. And we're going to talk about what all that means, okay? But, the topic here is community Medicaid updates. So we got to talk about the updates off at the very start. We're going to talk about it later on as well, in the middle as well. So a 30-month look-back period. They also make it harder for you to qualify from a need standpoint, and they make it so you need 3 ADLs. We're going to talk about what ADLs are, but it's activities of daily living. We're going to go into detail as to what they are, but now you need help with 3 of them, not 2 of them, not 1 of them, in order to, from a need standpoint, qualify for the program. Unless there's a dementia diagnosis, in which case that diagnosis alone is going to be enough. So a lot of moving parts. The good news is that this doesn't apply until October 1st as of right now. It might be extended a little further due to the virus, so we're not sure. But we're under the assumption that as of October 1st, if we file a Medicaid application, we're going to need a lot more documents than if we file one right now, or this many documents. And obviously, the cost is higher, and more importantly, the penalty that Medicaid may associate with your application is going to be a thing that we're going to need to worry about. Whereas in the past, and actually right this second, we don't need to worry about that penalty for an application filed today. So hopefully this all makes sense as we go through, but those are the real blaring headlines. We're thankful for the things that weren't cut. Believe it or not, there were a lot of things on the table that thankfully are still going to be available to us and to our clients, but this look back period is going to hurt quite a bit. And there you go, 30-month look back period. So what is a long-term care plan? We talk about this all the time. We talk about it when we're talking about estate planning, because one day the plan is to keep getting older. And it's tough to describe what actually long-term care is. It's one of those things where it's easier to describe it and define it by what it isn't. So what isn't it? Well, long-term care is not healthcare. Healthcare is when you can get better. That's my version of it, right? I'm sure there's a much more complicated way to describe these things, but to me, healthcare is you go to the doctor. That's healthcare because you can get better. The doctor can prescribe you something to help you get better. You break your leg, you go to the hospital, you're there because you can get better. If you're getting older and you go to the hospital because of a broken leg, you may, from the hospital, go to where? Go to rehab, right? To build up all those muscles. You've been off your feet for a week or two. That rehab is still getting better, right? That's the whole point of rehab. So as you'll see, when it comes to paying for long-term care, getting better is an important thing, right? When it's health care, it's different than long-term care. So long-term care, in my analysis here, an analogy is where now you have a bad hip, now you have a bad leg. It's just never going to be better. And so going from point A to point B is very difficult. Now that's long-term care, right? Nothing is going to make it better. You're just dealing with how to make life a little easier, but you're not going to repair the actual issue. When it comes to dementia, we're losing our capacity. We're not losing our capacity in a way where we can get it back. This is now the new normal, long-term care, not health care. The important considerations is, as we get older, and remember that's the plan, right? We keep getting older until we stop getting older. And when we stop getting older, that's when people show up and they talk about how great we used to be, right? So the idea is we keep getting older. And as we do get older, if we're successful in getting older, we're going to have these needs. And the important thing is to know there's options when it comes to long-term care. That's why it's long-term care planning, right? We actually have the opportunity to plan. Now, the vast majority of our clients, really anyone I've ever met, they want to stay home and they don't want help, right? They're going to fight help even if they really need it, and then begrudgingly they're finally going to agree. And when they get that help, they want only the least amount of help. They want whatever they need and not any more. They want to be independent. They're strong-minded. They have a lot of what's the word? They're strong. Okay, they don't want to. They have dignity, right? They don't want to have other people do things for them. So it's difficult. And so we find that when our clients need long-term care, they'd prefer to be at home when they get it. Makes sense, right? Now, there's a lot of wonderful places. I mean, I've been in assisted livings, guys, they're like beautiful hotels. Right? I've been in assisted livings that are like a one-star hotel, and I couldn't wait to get out. They vary, right? But what I want is for you guys to have a choice in whatever's going to happen. And most people end up choosing, at least initially, wanting to be home, especially if that's doable. The questions, though, are, where do you want to live? Who would you like to provide the care? How are you going to pay for it? That's the big one, right? That's why the planning part is so important. Options come with being able to afford it, right? I may want to live in Aspen, Colorado. Not going to happen, right? I may want to live in Miami Beach and live right on the intercoastal or something like that. That's great. A lot of people want that. But we need to have the money to be able to do that. And if we want a certain level of care in a certain place, money ends up talking quite a bit. And, you don't hear about the rich and famous in nursing homes, because what they end up doing is paying for out of their pocket privately for aides to come to their house, right? We're not rich and famous. So we're going to do a little more planning than they do. Now, when it comes to developing a plan, and this is beyond, so much of what we do is Medicaid. It's nursing homes, it's getting care at home, some cases it's assisted living. Long-term care in general, right? It's beyond me. It's beyond Herzog Law Firm or any other law firm, because it's whatever you want it to be. Long-term care includes 55 plus communities. It includes going from a house to a co-op in New Jersey, right? It's downsizing. It's being around certain people, or it's being around nobody. It's whatever you want it to be. So when we're developing a plan with you, we want to know what you want, right? Give us your best wish list, and then let's see, based on our knowledge, how we could fit your wish list into the reality of the different programs that are out there and the different living arrangements. Every community is different, right? So what's available in Warren County may be a lot different than what's available in Ulster County. And that's another part of it, right? We may want a certain level of care, but we live, a mile up a mountain road, and it's going to be really hard to get care there. So all these different things come into play, right? Maybe we do want social interaction. Maybe we definitely don't. We want to be a loner. We need to be around other people and do puzzles and be entertained and have a schedule. Now, I need to be left alone, right? Everyone's different, and developing a plan is very, very specific to you, okay? When it comes to ADLs, what kind of assistance do we actually need? So now we're going from want to need, right? We're talking about your personal hygiene. We're talking about bathing and toileting, okay? You don't want to be too proud on these things. Bad things happen when you're standing in the shower. That's why they have showers that are more like baths, and they have bars that can be installed. It's a recipe for disaster if there's that kind of personal hygiene services that are needed. Obviously, dressing and transporting, going from point A to point B. These are all activities of daily living. And as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the big changes that Medicaid has made or will be making is that you're going to need help with 3 activities of daily living in order to qualify, or have a dementia diagnosis where there's a ongoing need for assistance. Then there's other parts of being older, right? So sure, I'm fine around my house, but how do I get groceries? Am I driving? Am I taking a bus? Am I carrying all those heavy bags? Now we're bringing our own bags. It gets complicated. I can live on my own. I can't clean on my own anymore, right? All of those become a part of a long-term care plan. And I wish Kim was here because she could step in for a moment and push me aside and say it far more eloquently. But all of this is part of creating a long-term care plan. My component, right, is really the financial, the avoid liens, avoid Medicaid, and have more options that way financially. Whereas Kim's would be, let's holistically come up with a plan that works based on all of these different things. A lot of different services available out there. You'd be surprised. And some of them are through programs like Medicaid. Some are through Office of the Aging. Some are through your county and whatever specific programs are in your county. And as you see, there's a long list of them. I'm not going to go through them with you. So long-term care costs, right? That's my piece. I like to think that's the important piece. It's not, right? Kim's piece is far more important. But long-term care costs, that's really going to dictate what options we have, right? The want list may be great, but it's going to be our ability to qualify and pay for our needs that is going to dictate what kind of program we're going to have. And by far, well, not by far, this is what it is, right? There's home care, there's assisted living, and there's nursing homes. Now, home care isn't home. Okay, home care could be your home, but home care could be your apartment. Home care could be your daughter's home. Home care could be a 55+ community. So when we say home, that's really covering that's a big umbrella, right? Anything that's not assisted living or nursing home, that could be home. So that's home care. And there, the questions are going to be who's providing the care? Is it going to be family members, neighbors, family, friends? How are we paying them? Is it on the books? Is it not on the books? How much? Believe it or not, 24/7 home care when you're private paying is oftentimes more expensive than 24/7 care in a nursing home. And if you did the math and you took out a calculator and you said, all right, if I'm going to pay someone $20-25 an hour cash, and I'm going to need 24/7, you just do the math times 30 days, you'll see far more expensive than a nursing home. Assisted living can get quite expensive. They usually start at a lower ticket, maybe $3, $4, $5,000. But depending on your needs, especially if there's something called memory care that you need, especially in this area, you can get to $9,000, $10,000 of cost on a monthly basis for assisted living. As I mentioned, they're beautiful. They're really nice. A lot of them are. I've been in quite a few. And they are very nice, and you're paying for that niceness. Absolutely. And then there's nursing homes where the average cost these days is over $400 a day, usually much closer to $450. So we're getting into the $14,000 or $15,000 a month range. Now, paying for these costs, right? We have an idea of how much it's all going to cost. How are we going to pay for it? A bunch of different ways. The main headline grabbing ways are private paying, Medicare, Medicaid, long-term care insurance, and the VA, right? Getting veterans benefits. There's something called the aid and attendance pension you can get through the VA. Private pay is pretty self-explanatory, right? You're using your own money to pay. Medicare, and I went over this on Wednesday, Medicare makes things a little more confusing because Medicare and Medicaid, they share 6 letters. They sound so similar, and people get confused, right? They both deal with older people for the most part, right? There are situations where Medicare is covering you when you would think Medicaid is what's going to cover you, and vice versa. So what does Medicare do? In my mind, I say it's short-term, long-term care. Okay, short-term, long-term care. Medicare is health insurance for the elderly, 65 and older, right? You can be getting your health insurance through the Medicare program. There's parts A, B, C, D, not what the seminar is about. Everyone out there who's approaching 65 or already is past 65 who's a Medicare recipient, you should look at your programs. There are options you have if you need to talk to someone about different programs. I have just the person for you. You could email me and let me know. Medicare, health insurance. Okay. Now, where Medicare crosses into long-term care is when there's a hospital stay. Now, again, hospital, you're going to the hospital to get better. There's something going on, an acute issue, right? Health insurance, Medicare. We're in the hospital for 3 days. We've been admitted. Maybe it's a broken hip. Maybe we're just off our feet for quite a while. We're there for a couple of weeks, what have you. We may end up going to rehab from the hospital because we're not strong enough to go home. We're not ready to go to any other formal living arrangement. We go to rehab. In the rehab, up to the first 20 days of your stay there can be covered in full, 100% by Medicare. Up to the next 80 days from that point, so day 21 through day 100, Medicare will cover about 80% or so of your costs, which results in a copay that you have per day of $176. And if you say, my goodness, 176 times 30 is $5,100 and change, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's a lot less than $15,000 a month or more for your nursing and rehab. So we'll take what we can get. Now, when I say short-term, long-term care, it's because in a perfect scenario, which is anything but perfect, right, where it involves hospitals and falls and rehab and all that. What I mean is in the best facts, in order to get Medicare to cover things, we need to be in a hospital for 3 days. But we need to continue to get better over the course of the next 100 days when we're in rehab. I'm very careful when I say up to the first 20 days, up to the next 80 days, because at any point during your rehab, you may stop getting better. Remember what healthcare is, Medicare healthcare. It's getting better. Once you stop getting better, now you just have a bad hip. Once you plateau in your recovery, Medicare ain't going to cover you no more. And it's not uncommon for us to have clients who say, I just got a letter from my mom saying that Medicare is not covering her anymore. What do we do? And if mom's not ready to go home yet, we're going to start having to private pay for that nursing home. And it gets extremely expensive, $450, $475 a day. And that makes 176 look pretty darn good. So Medicare is short-term, long-term care. It's important to know this. Most of the time in our seminars, we say if you get nothing else out of this, it's that if a relative of yours who's elderly goes to the hospital and if there's a good chance they're going to need some rehab afterwards, it is incredibly important to know whether or not they've been admitted to the hospital or not. We've had a lot of situations. We've had family members of attorneys here where they were on observation status. They were in the hospital for more than 3 days, but they were on observation status for a good deal of it. And so when they were going to go to rehab, Medicare wouldn't have covered anything. And obviously, our attorney fought tooth and nail, and he knew what to say and how to say it. So you're entitled to know whether you've been admitted. Again, if you get nothing out of this, that's very, very important. It might be tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. Okay. So I mentioned the VA, there's veteran aid and attendance, long-term care insurance, that's certainly an option. There's an elimination period when it comes to long-term care insurance, but most policies have a home care component as well as a nursing care component. It's important to know if any, normally I'd say show of hands how many people have long-term care insurance. If you do, great. I want to know what your daily benefit is. I want to know what your elimination period is. I want to know if there's a lifetime benefit to your policy, right? I want to know how much that daily benefit is because it's huge. Imagine being in a nursing home with $450 a day as the cost, and you have a long-term care insurance that you think was going to cover you for $1.75 a day. We're going to have, you know, $10,000 of nursing home that we got to come up with. And that policy wasn't very good for those particular needs, as it turned out. So I want you to be educated. I want you to look at your own long-term care insurance policy. I'm happy to do it for you to know what you're working with, so then you know what you do or do not have to plan. By far, though, the largest way to pay for long-term care expenses in this country is the Medicaid program. And that's why the Medicaid program has such a large target on it. We're talking about 65 and over for the most part. We're talking about a long-term care need, and Medicaid can take care of some or all of your long-term care needs if it's home care, if it's nursing home care, if it's some adult daycare programs. And there are even certain assisted livings called ALPs, where you may be able to get a Medicaid bed, even though normally assisted living will not be paid by Medicaid. Okay. As I mentioned, there's nursing home Medicaid. We call that custodial Medicaid. The rules, you know, we veer off in two separate directions when we talk about the Medicaid program now, right? There's nursing home Medicaid, 5-year look back period, very strict financial restrictions, and obviously that look back period can be devastating to your savings. There we're dealing with nursing homes. The other route that we go when we're talking about home, and home can be your home, an apartment, your kid's house, the 55 plus community, it could be a lot of different places. We're talking about community Medicaid. Okay, the rest of this program, we're talking about community Medicaid and then talking about some preemptive things we can do to help. When it comes to the community Medicaid program, there are a lot of sub-programs because we need to know who the caregiver is going to be. I need to know what your level of care is compared to my level of care, okay? If we have a need for oversight and monitoring, like what? Like we have a dementia diagnosis, right? Something where we could qualify for something called a waiver program like NHTD that you see there. Or there's a traumatic brain injury, a TBI waiver, okay? In those kinds of situations, we have an ongoing need, right? It could be tens of hours a day because, for example, I may forget I left the stove on because I don't have the requisite capacity to be cooking and doing things like that. And I turn it on, and I forget I turned it on, you know, bad things happen. I can walk out the door and forget where I am, get disoriented and keep walking, right? I could forget that I took my medicine. I took my medicine 3 times already today. I forgot I took it, I take it again, right? And obviously there could be devastating ramifications to that. So there are certain programs within community Medicaid that are really designed for that kind of ongoing need over the course of a day. There's also task-based services that are available through something called an MLTC, Managed Long-Term Care Provider. And there we're talking about specific things that you need, okay? I can't get from point A to point B. I can't shower. Well, I'm not going to shower all day, so I don't need all day of care, right? I need help with these parts of living, and thus I'm going to qualify for X amount of hours based on those specific tasks that I need help with, okay? And within that program, there are even more options because oftentimes we say to people, your child can be one of your caregivers, your neighbor, someone of your choosing, through something called the Consumer Direct program. Now, Medicaid, and as they put in a 30-year look back period on community Medicaid, they're also fiddling with some of these things when it comes to determining the amount of hours that someone qualifies for, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Again, when it comes to finances for community Medicaid, there are, just like nursing home Medicaid, Medicaid will look at your income, they'll look at your assets, okay? When it comes to assets, we're looking for specific kinds of assets that we call resources. I think the next slide goes into what those are and what those aren't. Important for you to know in order to be approved in the month that you apply, you had to, on the first day of that month, so if we apply in May, you had to, as of May 1st, have no more than $15,750 of resources. Okay, it's not a lot of resources. Now, the word is resources, it's not assets. I know it says assets there. In particular, you should know not all assets are considered part of this, right? It's a very specific term. And as you'll see, qualified retirement plans, for example, 401ks, IRAs don't go against that amount. There's also income rules. We're going to have a whole slew of slides at the end of this presentation talking about how we could preserve income. But in general, you're not allowed to have a lot of income. You can have $895 a day of income in order to qualify for the program. Now, I don't know how many sport fans there are out there, but in a lot of sports, there are things called salary caps, and there are hard caps, and there are soft caps. And in the world of Medicaid, the asset cap, that's a hard cap. If I have $16,000 in my name on May 1st, I'm not qualifying in May. It's a hard cap. I got to be below that amount for that month. When it comes to income, it's a soft cap. Most people do have income over $895 a month, so no one would qualify, or very few people would qualify if that was a hard cap when it came to income. So it's a soft cap, and what Medicaid will require you to do, unless you do the trust that we're going to talk about later on, they're going to require you to spend down your extra income, your excess income. So if, as an example, I had $1,895 a day of income, I would be spending down my extra $1,000. How do I spend it down? I pay for caregivers before Medicaid has to pay for those caregivers. Okay, it's problematic for a number of reasons, including we're still living at home or some version of it, right? We still have taxes, or we're still paying rent. That didn't go away. We still have utilities. We still have to have food, right? We still need clothing. So you add up all that stuff, you can't live off of $895 a month with all of your extra income going to the care. And as you'll see, the pooled income trust can help with that. Now, there are certain assets or resources that don't count against you, and some of this is the same, some of it's a little different than when it comes to nursing homes. For example, we have care at home, it's okay to have a home. Makes sense, right? So your principal residence can be exempt. A burial plot and prepaid funeral contracts can be exempt. Small amounts of life insurance cash value can be exempt. You could have a car of any value be exempt. And your qualified retirement accounts that are in payment status. So you're 72 and you're getting your IRA distribution, that's in paying status. Those policies, the principle of the 401ks, the principle of the IRAs does not count against you as a resource. It doesn't count towards the $15,750. Instead, it counts as income. What? Well, you're getting distributions from that retirement. Those distributions are taxed. Those distributions are considered income. So when we look at what your income is on a monthly basis, we will take your required minimum distribution from your retirement divided by 12 months and figure out what your monthly income is. And for a lot of people, it may be Social Security, maybe a small pension, and of course, these distributions from the retirement account. Now, again, we've diverted, right? There's nursing home Medicaid. We're just focused on community Medicaid for the rest of this program, right? So for community Medicaid, right this second, there's no look back period. So if your assets are too high, well, there's a lot I can do. I just need to get rid of your assets. There's no look back period. When we apply, they don't say, what did you do a month ago with your money, right? Nursing homes, they say for 5 years, what did you do with your money? Community Medicaid, they don't ask, right? So we don't have to provide it. So right now, when we have clients who need home help, right? They need long-term care at home. It's quite easy to get them qualified. We simply get assets out of their name. Now, we don't just take it out and give it to their kids. That would be quite stupid in many instances. We still want you to have access to your money. And the other trust that we're going to talk about today, the irrevocable Medicaid trust or the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, that's going to help us have access to our money in a way where it doesn't count against us for Medicaid. It's magic. When it comes to income, we're going to look at a different kind of trust, the pooled income trust, right? The supplemental needs trust, which is for your excess income. And for home care, it is an absolute true statement. People think we are not saying the truth. They don't understand it because their neighbor didn't say it like this. We can protect all of your money. We can protect all of your income if you are getting home care. That's not the truth for nursing home Medicaid. When it comes to community Medicaid, absolutely we could do that, in particular if we're doing this before the 30-month look-back period starts in October, okay? So, as I mentioned, no look-back period. So we can move everything around next 6 days and you qualify on May 1st. We can move everything around over the next 37 days, you qualify for June 1st, right? So no look-back period is quite easy. As of October 1st and later again, and I'm sorry I keep hammering this, but it's that important. 30-month look-back period, 2.5 year look-back period. They're gonna wanna know how you got rid of all your money between now and then. You gave money to your grandson because he graduated from college, they wanna know about it, right? You started moving money to your kids because you're realizing it's harder for you to get around a little bit and this may be happening. And you did that 2 years ago, they're gonna wanna know about it, okay? So one of the ways to create instant eligibility currently, or create eligibility down the road when we've gone through the look-back period, is to create a Medicaid trust. And there are different kinds of trusts. On Monday and on Wednesday, I talked about this. I'm not going to talk too long about it. But one of the things you should know, it's quite funny actually, irrevocable trusts in New York are ones that you could still amend. You could change it. You could get rid of it. You could revoke it. And you can still control everything about it, right? That's actually how the Medicaid trusts work. Now, not all irrevocable trusts work that way. So if you start Googling revocable trusts, you're going to call me a liar, because you're going to see some rules for trusts that accomplish different things other than Medicaid approval, right, and protection. This kind of trust, the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, it's irrevocable because you, by yourself, with just your signature, are unable to revoke it. Okay? That's why it's called irrevocable, because you by yourself can't revoke it. But you still can have it be terminated. You could still get your money out of it, and you could do that with the help of your trustee and your beneficiaries. Okay? And in this kind of trust, you also have the ability to change it. You can actually fire your trustee and replace them with someone else. You could actually change your mind as to who your beneficiaries are one day down the road. And because you could change your beneficiaries and you could change your trustees, you could change the two people you need when you want your own money out of your own trust, the fact that you by yourself with your signature can't access it becomes irrelevant, because we control it by controlling our puppets, our trustees and our beneficiaries. So this becomes really helpful, because when we apply for Medicaid for someone, whether it's nursing home Medicaid or community Medicaid, what Medicaid looks at, the asset level, right? When we say $15,750, what they're looking for are those assets where you, by yourself, with just your signature, can turn something into money. When we put things into your trust, I can truthfully say you by yourself with just your signature cannot take your money out of your trust. We need that trustee and that beneficiary. You just happen to control who they are and they work for you and you can fire them and you still control everything, okay? And that's why this particular trust works, all right? So currently, if I was trying to get you or your loved one qualified on May 1st, I would quickly, I guess wouldn't go home this weekend and I'd work on your Medicaid trust, and then we'd spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday funding it. We would be transferring assets into your trust that we just created. And if we did all that by May 1st, there you go. We qualify for community Medicaid in May, okay? And again, the reason why putting things into that thing works is because that trust is not you, okay? It's not you. Now, a lot of people hear this and they say, well, what if I just give money to my kids? Well, that's true. Your kids are also not you. That could work to qualify you. The problem there is that then the money belongs to your kids. And not that your kids are irresponsible. I don't know your kids. I know some of your kids because some of your clients, and they may or may not be responsible. That's not the point though, right? I like control, and I want you to like control, and I want you to still be able to get your money whenever you need it. And you know what, when you're living at home and you're getting community Medicaid and the furnace breaks, I want you to have your own money to fix it, that you could access out of your own trust. And if we're worried about something that may never happen down the road, like needing a nursing home or even needing home care, and I'm saying, hey, plan now before, because there is this look back period for home care and there is this 5-year look back period for nursing homes. Why would you ever do something like that and kind of lose control of your assets because you may possibly someday maybe need long-term care? It's not a guarantee. And of course you wouldn't do that. So you still maintain your control because you still have the strings of ownership over these puppets, your trustee and your beneficiary. Name of the game, though, is to do it as early as possible. And that's not me talking because I want you to do trust with me. That's me talking because there's a look back period. And if you don't act ahead of time, our options are going to be limited. Some more stuff on the trust here, right? So there's a trustee on a trust. That won't be you on this kind of trust. You will be the income beneficiary of the trust. So any income generated, whether it's rental property rent, whether it's dividends, whether it's interest, that all goes to you. You still report it on your individual taxes, just like you always did. Oftentimes, we're putting your property into the trust because trusts, in addition to helping with long-term care, also help us avoid probate one day when we pass away. And so normally we are putting houses, and even though a couple slides ago we said houses are exempt, yeah, as long as you still live there, it's exempt. If your care ever elevates to needing nursing home care, we're going to wish that we had protected that house as well. And that house is public enemy number one when it comes to probate, because we can't have beneficiaries on houses like we do on bank accounts on life insurance. Okay. Upon your death, right, when the trust ends, it's just like a will in terms of who gets what. The beauty, though, is we get to avoid probate. We avoid the courts and all those filing fees and attorney's fees. Okay. Now, what do we put in? Obviously, look, I don't know if you're going to need long-term care. I don't. I hope you don't. Chances are, I don't know how many people are listening right now. Let's see, we got 64 people. So about 50 of us, me included, are going to have long-term care at some point in our lives. So it's possible we won't. It's guaranteed we're all going to die. Sorry to say that on a rainy day like today. What's going to happen? So as a result, let's avoid probate. So let's put in at a minimum those assets that we own that would go through probate if not for it being in a trust. So real estate sounds great. Then I look at what else are assets that Medicaid cares about. And I say, how comfortable am I with the idea that I could get this money whenever I want to, but it's not like going to the bank myself. What ends up happening is that initially we're saying, well, maybe leave 30, 40, 50, 60 grand outside your trust. That's a big range there. It depends on a lot of factors and whether we're married or not and so on. When we are actually applying for Medicaid, though, our choices become far more limited because we got to get down to the $15,750 of resources. So we are going to put everything else into that trust. Okay. Sometimes we're going to recommend that you leave some money to your kids and you give it to them today, maybe say $10,000. Why would we do that? Well, we get it out of your name and maybe your son or daughter opens up a bank account and just keeps your 10 grand there. So it won't be counted against you for purposes of your application. And if the furnace does break, they could always use that money that's theirs that you gave them and use it to take care of your furnace or whatever. Okay. What do we leave out of the trust? Your income sources. So if you have a checking account that's receiving your pension or receiving your Social Security, receiving your RMD, that's going to stay in your name. We're just going to make sure the balance of that is under the cumulative value of $15,750. Okay. So let's talk about this look back period rule that I've already addressed a number of times. I want you to feel what it means because it's easy to say 30 months, 2.5 years. Okay. So the way look back periods work with Medicaid is that we only care when we are actually applying for some sort of help for you, right? We're applying for home care. That application going forward is going to require us to look backwards 30 months, 2.5 years, and provide documentation to Medicaid. This is bank statements, quarterly statements for your stocks, bonds, brokerage accounts. We're showing them that you didn't move everything out of your name in a masterful stroke of genius. Okay. And they're normally looking for $2,000 per transfer, maybe $1,750, $1,500 a transfer. They actually have the right to look at every transfer that's made. So if you say, well, you said $2,000, so you know what, we're just going to do $1,400 a month, every month to each of our kids. Well, a round number like that, they're going to attack it. So I have some ideas as to how you can move money if you wanted to, but we'll say that for a different podcast perhaps. So they look backwards. We apply, we're going to provide 2.5 years of paperwork. Now, let's say that you listen to us or other attorneys and you said, you know what, that's it. I'm going to create a trust. I want to avoid probate. I want to do it in a way where I still control my assets. This whole look back period is scary, and you prepare, we do a trust today. Okay, so it's April 24th, 2020. In a year from now, April 24th, 2021, for whatever reason you have extreme long-term care needs that require us to apply for community Medicaid in particular, since we're talking about that topic today. When we apply, we're going to be subject to some sort of look-back period, right, 30 months, and we're going to have a penalty that's associated with our application. The penalty is because in 2020, today, we set up a trust and we put things into it. So in the example here, if about $112,000 is transferred into your trust, that's the value of your house, let's say, and you set up a trust and you throw it in there. Well, house is a bad example, actually. It's a brokerage account, okay, $112,000. We throw that into your trust to protect the value of it. If it turns out we're applying for Medicaid within the next 2.5 years, we're going to pay a price for that $112,000 transfer. That price will be a period of ineligibility, and it's calculated using a certain denominator that the state provides. Not to get into too much detail, but you'd be looking at about a 10-month penalty period during that time. That would mean that until 10 months have expired with you having paid for your long-term care needs as you go, Medicaid won't pay $1 of your care needs. When it comes to nursing homes, this is a huge deal because that 10-month penalty period may mean that we are paying privately $14,000, $15,000 a month for 10 months. That's 140 grand. That's 150 grand. And if you say, wait a minute, I only gave away 112. Why is there a $150,000 penalty? Exactly. It's because the penalty stinks. It's awful. For home care, it's going to be interesting to see how the state applies the new budget rules here, right? We know there's a look back period. We know that they're going to be applying a certain regional rate as a denominator to calculate the penalty. The question is going to be, well, what if I only need 6 hours of care a day? Is my penalty worse than if I needed 23 hours a day of penalty? Probably if you need 23 hours a day, that penalty is going to probably be worse. And we're going to get some guidance on this in the coming months to know exactly how to attack it. But by far, any practitioner you'll ask will say, it's better to not deal with the penalty to begin with. And that's why we really want people to plan in advance. So obviously, planning ahead, that's the name of the game. Not everyone has a chance to do that. And one of our slogans here is whether it's 5 years ahead of time or 2.5 years ahead of time or 5 days ahead of time, there's always something we're going to be able to do. And in our bag of tricks when it comes to avoiding a penalty period where we did not plan ahead, that gets into something called a crisis plan. Sometimes we're lucky, sometimes we're clever. It's really good to be lucky though. So what am I talking about? Well, if we're lucky enough to have a spouse when our long-term care needs emerge, we know that our spouse can have a lot more money than we're allowed to have. That's number one. We also know that even if we give them everything and they have millions of dollars in their name, they could elect something called a spousal refusal. Okay. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it because it varies so much between counties and as to what the counties can do about it. But one of the Medicaid regulations says that if your spouse refuses to provide their assets, their resources for your care, and refuses to make it available, Medicaid is forced to consider husband's application without wife's assets. And obviously, we only apply when we know husband's down below the $15,750, so we know he's going to be qualified. The county doesn't like when wife does that very much. So what they do about it will vary county by county. If you're sitting in Ulster County, consider yourself lucky because they don't really do much of anything about it. If you're living in Albany County, don't consider yourself lucky. It's like clockwork. We know exactly the letter we're going to get after the spousal refusal. And there's things we could do about that. And again, that's more for consultations and really fact specific, so I don't want to mislead anyone. Another way we deal with having not planned ahead of time is doing a gift and loan plan or a gift and promissory note plan. There we're kind of making lemons out of lemonade, and we're saying, all right, we know we're going to be private paying for a period of time. We know we're going to be penalized because of $100,000 of transfers. Well, we have a couple bells and whistles, and we're able to make it as if it's a $50,000 penalty instead of a $100,000 penalty. And we do that through gifting and through a loan, essentially, between the applicant, between dad and you, where he's lending you money. You say, well, I don't need to borrow money from him. It's not about that, right? The whole point is he can move money to you. You promise to pay him back over the next 5-6 months. And when you pay him back, because you're paying him with interest, Medicaid will not have an issue with the loan to you to begin with, because dad was very clever and it's a business decision that he made. He's earning interest, right? And instead, without doing the math, I mean, if I had a board in front of me, I would, we're able to cut your worst case scenario in half. So remember, even if it's 5 days before a nursing home, we can normally cut your worst case scenario in half. Then there's essentially being lucky, right? We have clients who have been living with their child. Let me put actually the other way around. Child has been living with mom. Child has not been taking care of mom. Mom has probably still been taking care of child. But something happens, and because son was living in the house, and because we could make the assumption if not for him living in the house, mom would have needed a nursing home far earlier, which is maybe even far from the truth. We can get a house, for example, transferred to a child caretaker, and there's no need to prove that they were doing any caretaking. Also, if there are disabled children of the applicant, we can move assets and property to that disabled child, and there's an unlimited exemption there. So depending on your fact pattern, you might get lucky. I'd rather, plan ahead of time. Okay, so we talked about assets, and I probably confused you. I can't see your photos, which is probably better for me because there'd probably be a lot of confused faces and scrunched noses. Now we're going to shift to income. Okay, how does Medicaid treat income? I said before, income is a soft cap. A bunch of slides before we talked about how the amount of money you could have is not so much. $895 of monthly income for a single individual. Okay, so we have $28.95, $2,000 above. How do we deal with that? Do we really need to spend all of it on our long-term care? No. We can use something called a pooled supplemental needs trust or a pooled income trust. And the way that works, and we'll use an example of $1,895 a month as income. So Norma, good old Norma, has $1,895 of income a month. As we mentioned, the income cap is $895. So we're over incomed by $1,000 a month. There will be a spend down requirement of that $1,000 a month. And absent doing a pooled income trust, that extra income is going to be used to pay for your caregivers, to pay for hours that Medicaid otherwise would have been covering. And once you get through the 1,000, then Medicaid covers the rest of the hours that you happen to need. Because we can't live off of $895 and still be in our own house or own apartment, right? It's just unrealistic. It almost becomes essential that we use these pooled income trusts. They're an a la carte item. When we do a Medicaid application, not everyone needs a pooled income trust, but when you do, it's a separately billed item. When you need it, and it'll make sense because of math like this. So in this situation, if we don't do something like a pooled trust, we're essentially losing $1,000 a month of income. If we do it, we're going to be saving $1,000 of income, so it'll make far more sense to do that kind of trust. The way it works in general, and I'll try my best to explain this, forgive me if I fail miserably. So there are these very large entities, non-for-profit organizations that are the holder of lots of people's money. They are pooled trusts. And if Norma decided to enroll with a pool trust within this giant trust, Norma would have her own segregated account. And based on the rules of Medicaid, every single month, $1,000 would go from Norma's bank account to her pooled trust account, and it'll stay there. Okay. Now, Norma's son can be an agent for her and can send to her pooled income trust account her bills, stuff in her name, her tax bills, her insurance bills, her food bills, okay? The furnace bill, a new roof, it's time to update this, let's do new windows, whatever, okay? If it's something in her name for one of her assets, right? So it's her windows, not my windows at my house. The pool trust will pay that bill from the money they're holding for Norma, i.e. we're using Norma's own income to pay for Norma's own expenses. If we don't do that, we're using Norma's income to pay for Norma's care. And let's be real, everyone that is, well, most people that are getting long-term care help, they are on a fixed budget. They're not working anymore. So when we introduce this new thing in life called long-term care expenses, it's a budget buster. So the pool trust helps us save that excess money. Again, what kind of things? Utility bills, cable, phone, rent, mortgage, groceries, credit card bills. Some pool trusts have actually like a debit card you can use. Now, obviously, you know, if you don't use it for mom, you're going to get in trouble, right? It's supposed to be used just for them. And there's a lot of proof that you're going to need to provide. You know, we normally like when there's, you know, big, nice, juicy expenses, right? A mortgage, tax bill, things like that will always make a lot more sense for us to use. We don't want to have the pool trust looking at every single transaction. Oh, looks like there was $10 on Netflix. Was this your Netflix or was this their Netflix, etc. So let's talk for a second. Why has New York had no look back period for home care? Why are they still allowing, even when they implement this 30-month look back period, why are they still allowing pool trusts to save all your income? A lot of times people tell us it sounds too good to be true. It isn't too good to be true. The reason they're doing it is very self-serving, okay? They know that not everyone needs 24/7 care in a nursing home. But they know that if you can't afford to be home and you have long-term care needs, you may well end up being in a nursing home. And if that's the case, you may well or likely or eventually will be covered by Medicaid. And Medicaid paying for your nursing home is going to be a lot of money. Medicaid just paying for your home care is going to be cheaper most of the time, just about every time. And the reason why is because when you're at home, you're paying for home. You're paying for the taxes and the insurance. You're paying your cable bill. Right? When it snows, you're dealing with it. When you're hungry, you're paying for it. When you need clothes, you're paying for it, right? When it comes to a nursing home, they're feeding you, they're the brick and mortar, they're paying 24/7 staff, and you may not even need 24/7 care. So home care has always been really attractive. And what's interesting is that these new rules are going to make it a little harder to qualify for care at home, but not so hard that you'd prefer being in the nursing home financially. What they've essentially done is made it harder for you to initially qualify when you need a small amount of care. And you know, the look back period will financially make it harder to qualify. But you know, changing from 2 activities of daily living that you need help with to 3, that's a big change. So they're going to have a lot of people who barely need long-term care who are not going to qualify for home care anymore. And that's where they decided to cut things. But the pooled income trust, where you could save all your income, it's not too good to be true. We just need your house to be the type of house that could accommodate your needs. We need your community and your location to be the location that could accommodate your needs. And hopefully it all works out, okay? So reviewing some of these rules, the bullet points, pretty self-explanatory. Community Medicaid is care at home. Home is a moving target. It's not just literally your home, okay? It's figuratively your home. You could protect assets by putting them in a trust. Look, you could protect assets by giving them to me. It's just a really bad idea because then you don't control your own assets. When you put it in a trust, you can still control it and have access to it and pay for things. Currently, until October 1st, as of right now, there's no look back period. So we're expecting and are already seeing a large amount of people who are on the fence about the program. Yeah, dad's got dementia, mom's got Parkinson's. They do need help, but they don't need a lot of help yet. We're not ready for this. This sounds like a big investment. Now they're moving. They're moving on it because it just doesn't happen overnight, and they want to make sure that they're going to be perfectly protected before October 1st. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Now, a couple different times we talked about moving assets around to help you qualify. We talked about creating trusts. We talked about enrolling in pooled income trusts. One of the crisis plans I said was a gift and loan plan, if you recall. You can't do that unless you have the ability to gift, right? If we do have an incapacitated family member because they have dementia, and that's the kind of need they have, they can't arrange these things. They can't move their assets around. We find it imperative, no matter what, that every single person that comes across our office, our phone line now that we're doing phone appointments, you got to have a healthcare proxy, power of attorney, the last will and testament. I add trust to that, but trusts are a little more expensive than these documents, so that becomes more of a business decision. This is just nuts and bolts, easy peasy, you got to have it. Power of attorney in particular, because we have a good power of attorney that allows our agent, whether it's our spouse and then our kids, or our kids and then our grandkids, whatever, the ability to gift on our behalf, move heaven and earth on our behalf. It makes my job that much easier because I could say, yeah, no, I got you. I know she's not doing well. It's as if I'm still talking to her, and we can move heaven and earth to get her qualified with the best plan based on her specific facts. So 2 things to leave here with, a lot of things to leave here with, hopefully. Number 1, right, if we're in the hospital, loved ones in the hospital, let's see if they're admitted or not. That's an important fact when it comes to rehab. Number 2, make sure you have a power of attorney with gifting privileges, certain gifting privileges, worded the right way. Happy to look at it, happy to prepare it for you. It will make life a lot easier. Now, we do free consults. We always do free consults. Now they're a little different because they're on the phone or they're video, but it's all the same. We go through your details specific to you. There's a lot we get done in an hour. You should think about a free consultation at some point, right? You should think about, if you're an existing client, I know a lot of you are, coming in, kick the tires again. Let's make sure that your trust has enough assets in it. Let's make sure that that account that you kept out 10 years ago hasn't quadrupled in value and then gone down by half and then gone up again. You can call us at 518-465-7581 for one of those consultations. You could email us at info@herzoglaw.com. Likely tomorrow, I'll be emailing each and every one of you a copy of these slides, as well as a couple links if you want to be added to our newsletter. We are on the radio every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Magic 590 and 100.5 FM, 96.9 FM and 1410 a.m. in the North Country. On Sundays, it's played again, so don't call on the Sunday. You're not going to get in. But they replay it down in our Kingston location, so Dutchess County, Ulster County, Greene County. You could hear us on Sundays as well. And thank you so much for listening. And for many of you listening to 3 or 4 or 5 of these seminars, I hope they were helpful. On Wednesday of next week, we call it Webinar Wednesday. I know, it's an awful name. But on Wednesdays going forward, at least in the month of May, we're going to be doing morning, afternoon, and night seminars all on the same day. Different topics. They'll be at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., at 6 p.m. This coming Wednesday, the topics 10 a.m. are going to be this very topic right here. If you hear it and you're confused, you may want to listen to it again. Really, though, you just come in for an appointment. It's free, and we can apply everything to your facts. 10 a.m., though, is Community Medicaid. At 2 p.m., it's Wills versus Trust. It's probably our most popular seminar. My My partner, Debbie Verney, will be doing that. Jay Marie Schaefer will be doing the Community Medicaid at 10. Debbie Verney will be doing the Wills versus Trusts at 2 p.m. I'll be doing the 6 p.m. seminar. It's called Estate Planning in Prime Time. It's a duplicate of what I did on Wednesday. If you missed it, I highly encourage you to attend. And I have a couple questions here, so let's take a quick look. Hopefully I can provide some answers. Thank you. Oh, good. Of course. Thank you. Question. If I have long-term care insurance, does pulling house and stock in, I guess it's, do I put things into an irrevocable trust? I love this question. I love this question very much. So Jim, thank you for the question. It's complicated, but there's a route here where you may want to still do it. So long-term care insurance, number one, doesn't help you with avoiding probate. So I do want you to do something with that house at some point, because probate really is as bad as I try to make it out to be. That doesn't mean it needs to be an irrevocable trust. It could be a revocable trust. It could be something called a life estate deed. It's worth the conversation. When it comes to if it's going to be a Medicaid trust, the idea is you have long-term care insurance and you're paying every year. You're paying a premium. You're going to keep paying that premium. And you may never have a need. You may have a need tomorrow. I don't know how life is going to shake out. If you did the trust and you did it with the mindset, hey, you know what, I'm going to avoid probate. And then 5 years down the road, right now it's 2025, and you got through that look back period even for a nursing home, and you're looking at this long-term care policy, you may, I guess, say, you know what, I don't want to pay that amount of money every year anymore. I want to go on a vacation, perhaps. So we have had clients who have done exactly that. I don't recommend that for you because I don't know you. So I gotta learn about you, and we gotta talk about your fact pattern and see what makes sense and what doesn't. Certainly avoiding probate, though, is something that I think is worthwhile. Then Carrie's got a question here. Would you set up a pool trust at the time that you are going to need home care, or way ahead of time? Thank you for, I should have covered that, Carrie. Thank you for asking. So we're gonna do the pool trust when we are applying for home care. You don't do it ahead of time because it's a restriction on your own income. You wouldn't voluntarily do that unless we absolutely have to, when there's that soft cap on the income that applies. Question, is there a look back period on the promissory note by Catherine? No, Catherine, there isn't. And the reason why is because it wasn't a gift, right? It's a shrewd business transaction by dad. He's earning interest. And Medicaid's okay with arm's length transactions, right? They're okay with if you bought something. They're okay if you went on a trip. They're just not okay with you giving things away. And when it's a promissory note, it's not a gift. So they're okay with it. And it looks like those are all the questions, and it looks like I need to have a glass of water. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Stay safe out there, and hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday. Take care.